Good evening, everyone. Awesome. Thank you for being here this evening. There are many places that you could have chosen to be, but you're here tonight. I'm Dr. Jackie McMorris, your county manager, and tonight we're here to make this meeting about you. We want to answer questions that you may have about the proposed cities that you have probably been hearing and reading a lot about. But before we get started, I would like to introduce you to your two commissioners who are here tonight. I'd like to start with our Vice Chair, Commissioner Joanne Burrow, who's going to say a few words, after which we will bring up District 2 Commissioner Jerica Richardson. Let's welcome our Vice Chair, Commissioner Burrow.
Good evening, everyone. It is an honor to be with you all tonight. We have our staff here and our county manager to answer questions that you may have. We are here to educate. We can't advocate one way or the other for Cityhood, but we do want to give you all the information and resources you need to make a decision, important decision. Is everybody okay? So I'd just like to say thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us tonight. This is being live streamed and it will be recorded so that you can watch it later for those out there that weren't able to attend. So be safe out there. Welcome to our beautiful Sewell Mill Library and Cultural Center. This is something that Helen Poyer is very proud of. Thank you.
My remarks will be absolutely brief. Just grateful to have you all here tonight. Grateful that you care about the community, want to ask the hard questions. I encourage you to ask the hard questions because this is about your future. And while we're going to do our best to answer every single thing that we're fielded, just truly appreciate that you care, and we want to make sure that you're equipped with the information that you need so that you can make the best decision for you and your family. We can't advocate either way, just as Commissioner Burrow stated. That is absolutely true. So if it's an opinion you're looking for, consult your family. But we are here to just focus on the facts and what's in the proposal itself. So thank you all so much. Thank you, staff, for your commitment to this. This is a lot of hard work beyond the call of duty, and I just really appreciate your participation in this. That's it. Thank you.
Yes, give her a round of applause. Hi, everybody. I'm Ross Cabot. I'm the Communications Director at Cobb County. I love this library. It hosted Walton Drama when our school was being redone, and it was a great place to work out of, and I'm glad that you all are here tonight. As the commissioners both mentioned, we're here just to educate. The county really had no role in forming or approving any of the Cityhood efforts, but we are getting a lot of questions, and I know it started with the commissioners. They started getting peppered with questions earlier this year, and they have continued to come in. So we've held, this is the second in a series of town halls, just to educate, try to answer some of the questions the best that we can. We've got a lot of staff here who will try to do that tonight. Bill Volkman, our Chief Financial Officer, Jessica Gwynn with Community Developments Director, Michael Brantley, our Parks Director, Scott Hamilton, our Interim Police Chief, and Mike Schutz, our Deputy Fire Chief here. And we also have Melissa Alterio with 911 and Drew Ressler with Transportation, so they're all here to answer our questions this evening. If you do have questions and haven't submitted any yet, we're going to just have you fill them out on a card and present it to some of our volunteers here. Look for Krista, she's in the stripes over here, and Allison in the green right in the front. They'll handle your questions. And the reason we do that is just to keep things moving along. We found it worked really good the first time we did this, and I've also been told if I don't get this done in 1 hour, when I leave here, one of my tires might be flat. So we're going to definitely get this done in 1 hour, no matter what happens. And once again, one of the main questions that we've received is, will we still be county residents? People keep asking that, and the county is always going to provide certain core services, including the sheriff's office, jail, court system, water, medical examiner, many other public services as well. So, you will be Cobb County residents no matter what happened in the Cityhood votes. And we've had a lot of other questions that have come up, basically, why has the county done this? Again, this is nothing that we have been involved with in plan, but it will affect us. And that's what we want to talk about tonight, is the impact on county government and what it means. And to get the show rolling, 4 minutes in, Bill Volkman, our finance director, is here to go over a financial overview of how the Cityhoods would impact Cobb County's bottom line, basically. Bill?
Thank you, Ross. We're going to start with the proposed services. So that's going to kind of drive some of these, and all of the information, let me see, is this, there we go, a little better. Okay, so just wave at me if you can't hear me. The proposed services and the impacts are going to come straight from the feasibility studies for all 4 cities. So what we've done is take that information that was provided in the feasibility studies and then see what kind of impact it would have on the county. So as we kind of go across the board here, you see City of East Cobb. Well, we'll go all 4. All 4 cities are planning to include planning and zoning, code enforcement, parks and rec, limited municipal court, and then City of East Cobb is proposing police, fire, 911. City of Lost Mountain and City of Mableton are proposing sanitation. So let's go to the next slide, just to show you the cities, and then we're going to go to the revenue or the overall financial impact. So as we walk through these, you're going to see the impact on the revenues here. First and foremost, City of East Cobb's a little unique because what in their proposal and feasibility study, they propose transitioning the millage that the current residents pay into the Cobb County Fire Fund to support their general operations. So that's why they have a unique line for the fire district. You see that $13.99 million. That is the current revenue that is collected in the fire fund today to support the fire operations in that area. They'll be repurposing that for their general operations. And they're proposing several other revenues like insurance premium tax, franchise fees, and things of that nature, building our business permits, building permits. Those are going to have the general fund impacts as we move forward. And then they're also uniquely proposing a 911 service as well. So that would have an impact on the county's 911. That's the $1.50 that we all pay into the Cobb County 911 system. City of Lost Mountain is not proposing any public safety services nor a millage rate associated with those. So those are going to be strictly general fund impacts for the same revenue sources that we already identified. Like I said, the insurance premium tax, TABT, building permits, and so on and so forth. City of Mableton is very similar in their general fund impact. However, City of Mableton and Vinings do have hotels located in their proposed city limits, so they would receive hotel motel tax collections. But the overall impact to the county, we would look at if all 4 cities were formed, you'd see a $41.4 million reduction in county revenues. And that would be across the board. You can see the individual breakdowns for each of the 4 cities there. I'm going to jump on to the next one. Okay, so we did look at reductions in spending. So uniquely, Cobb County, well, not uniquely, Cobb County is a service industry, and obviously our biggest cost is personnel. The current situation in the county is we're experiencing heavy vacancies, and one of the things that we would look to do is reassign the existing staffs in the facilities that would be taken over, specifically for parks, fire, and so on. These are the main ones that you see here. So the parks and rec you see is operating costs and reductions for each of the 4 cities that are being proposed. The biggest one is the City of Mableton due to some of the facilities that we have down in the City of Mableton. Fire is proposing a reduction for the operation and maintenance of the 2 fire stations that would be included in the City of East Cobb. And then City of Mableton and like I said, City of Vinings are proposing hotel motel tax collections. So this would be monies that the county would have used to fund Cobb Travel and Tourism type expenses as well as service the stadium bond debt as we move forward. So you can see the overall reduction is not anywhere near what we would see on the revenue side as a $4.3 million reduction because, again, the personnel would be the biggest cost for these existing services would be simply be reassigned to other areas. So it's a $4.3 million reduction. Go to the next slide, Ross.
I think that may be your last slide.
Okay.
So since you're warmed up, I guess the first question that I've got that you just touched on is people are asking, why won't the county save more money by being relieved of providing certain services if the new cities come online? You just kind of touched on that, but kind of go back over that again.
Yeah, let me expand on that a little bit. So we're in our budget cycle for 2023, and we know the cityhood vote for the 3 cities will take place this May. What this would have an impact on requested increases for us as we move forward. For example, we work very closely with parks and fire specifically for East Cobb, as well as parks throughout the entire 4 cities. And we're looking at reassigning those staff, but we're also would be looking at possibly reducing the request for additional staff. So what we're saying, because we would be able to reassign that staff, we would not need as many new staff to fill those needs and service levels as we move forward.
Also, I have a couple questions on the financial side. People are asking, why haven't we done more downstream predictions concerning the impact of these cities? Why not look 5, 10, 20 years out?
Okay, so that's a great question. So we started with the feasibility studies, which, I think a lot of these cityhood movements have been discussed for years, and they really kind of happened very quickly this year. There's been discussion going on for years and years about possible citihoods forming. They really didn't gain much traction until this session, and then they moved fairly quickly. So once we saw that they had traction, we did reach out to see about conducting our own impact studies, and basically due to the short time frame between the time they pass through committee to the time the election will take place, we were told that that could not be completed. So we had to do the best with the information we had, being the feasibility studies, and look inward to see what our impacts are. So the $41 million that we identified in loss of revenues would be the full year impact after the cities are fully formed and they begin collecting all of the revenues. So we do look at what that would look like immediately to Cobb, but obviously with growth in the county, those numbers would expect to go up as we move forward.
And I think everybody knows, but the cityhood votes will be for East Cobb, Lost Mountain, and Bindings in May, and Mableton in November.
Yes.
All right. And then up here on the screen, I put just a couple of the two really basic FAQs. For the last one, I had a whole bunch of these slides, but we'll talk about many of the questions moving forward. But again, when asking about why the new cities are being proposed and why the process moved so fast, really questions that we can't answer. That's just the way they played out based on those who formed them and the legislative sponsors that have come through. And again, I'll remind you, anybody out there who has questions as we go along, Allison will help you, or Krista over here too, as we go along. I guess the next bunch of questions get to go to you, Jessica Gwynn, our Community Development Director. Many claim the county is moving to more medium and high-density developments into East Cobb. Is that true?
No, that's not the case. We have, currently we're working on the 5-year update to our comprehensive plan, and I hope that some of you have been involved in that process. The comprehensive land use plan is really the plan that drives land use and development in the county, and it designates for each parcel in the county how we expect that property to develop over the future. In order for property to be developed for medium or high-density residential, typically it would have to come in for a zoning request. That is a public process. It's vetted out through a public hearing process. Gives you all the opportunity to participate in that process. And again, we certainly look to make our recommendations in line with what's called for in the comprehensive plan. Again, a very public-driven process.
Next question for you. I've kind of grouped these up to start with. How much could a new city prohibit new developments from moving in?
A city would have the same powers as a county essentially, and it would still be the same process in terms of zoning, in terms of the codes, the plans, all of those things would still be in place. So really, it would be no more than the county currently has.
And who will determine, or how will it be determined what code enforcement can do and enforce in the new cities?
That's always driven by the code. So currently, the code enforcement is determined by the codes of the county. Typically, when a new city forms, it's very typical that they would adopt the codes of the county, at least from the outset. And those would be the codes that would be enforced in the new city. And then down the road, as that new city was able and in a place to adopt their own codes, those would be enforced within the city.
And you may have touched on this already, but there's some questions, and we talked about this in the last town hall about the Unified Development Code. Some believe that's a blueprint for higher density development, but what is that and what does it really do?
Right, so right now in Cobb County, we have a number of documents that regulate development within the county. There's the county code, which includes the zoning ordinance, subdivision ordinance, and so forth. We also have the development standards that have been adopted, as well as design guidelines. So all of those 3 documents really come together to drive the development process and regulations within the county. The intent of the Unified Development Code is to bring those all into one streamlined document. I expect that most of the regulations probably won't change significantly. Again, it'll be a very publicly driven process. There will be opportunity for a lot of community engagement to tell us, what is it that you'd like to see in your community, and how can we shape the code so that it's going to produce that desired type of development. So again, it's certainly the intent of that has nothing to do with density. If you look around the region and throughout Georgia, there are a broad range of communities that have a unified development code versus zoning ordinance, subdivision regulations, including like Paulding County, Forsyth County, I believe, has gone through unified development codes. So there are a number of different communities that have a number of different development patterns and styles. It really is just a matter of streamlining and simplifying the process, as well as really bringing our codes up to current standards to reflect the development patterns and also the desire of the community today.
No, I'm going to move on to Parks. Michael Brantley with Parks is here. Thank you, Jessica. And again, I've got some, by the way, y'all are submitting questions. I appreciate it. Y'all pretty much have the same questions, so I guess great minds think alike. There's a lot of questions that are very similar, and we'll get to them the best we can. And a lot of them we're hitting on right now, including Michael, which parks will the new cities, and I think a lot of people here are talking about the city of East Cobb, which will they operate, and how is that determined?
So looking at the feasibility study, they listed certain parks inside of the boundaries. We anticipate that those are the parks that they will want to take over. They were listed at East Cobb Park, Fuller's Park, Hyde Farm, the Felton property, Worthington property, which was actually outside of the boundaries of the city of East Cobb. I think that was just a typo, because I believe that they were looking at the Shepherd property, which is right across the street from East Cobb. So I think that was just a little typo. And then you've got Wright Environmental Center. So those are the properties they're looking at in the feasibility study.
What about, not so much in East Cobb, but we have a lot of undeveloped parks that have plans to be developed. What will happen to those if a new city takes them?
Well, depending upon when the park was built and how bought, how the park was bought, a lot of our parks were bought through the 2006 or 2008 Parks Bond. A lot of those parks have certain deed restrictions on them. And I can't remember in the back of my head which all ones have that now, but certain ones have it to where they're actually restricted from being sold for a development or anything like that. A lot of them have that restriction where they have to be parks in perpetuity. So there's certain parks, especially in East Cobb, that have that. Felton property has a deed restriction on it. Hyde Farm purchased with the Park Bond Fund or parts of it. So there's certain things that you look at with that, whether it's going to be restricted or not. But again, you would always hope that parks stay parks for as long as they can.
Several questions about the Tritt property in the East Cobb Park, and I think that's part of a SPLOST, if I remember. What would be the status of purchasing the Tritt property and adding it to the East Cobb Park?
So there was already one portion purchased from the Tritt family, about 29 acres, if I'm not mistaken. There are still acreage that is left at Tritt Park, which we call Tritt Park. It's the Tritt family property that is still left. There is $8 million in the SPLOST 2022 for purchase of the Tritt property. The county has first right of refusal to purchase that at a minimum of $8 million. If the property were to be asked for $10 million by the family at some point, then that would be the cost of it. But there's only $8 million in the SPLOST 2022 allocated for the purchase of the rest of the Tritt property, and that's all that's there.
Thank you, Michael. Brantley, Parks Director. Drew Rassler is our Transportation Director. I just yelled at him to come up here because I have two questions we've received. First of all, in the new cities, who will take care of the roads?
Thank you, Ross. Short answer is we're not sure. Cobb DOT currently maintains about 2,400 miles of roadway and 550 traffic signals throughout all of Cobb County. The two pieces of information that we have currently to go off of in terms of answering that question are the feasibility study and state law. So I pulled up state law, so I just wanted to quote that just so y'all had that. When a new municipal corporation is created by act of the General Assembly, the new municipality shall assume ownership, control, care, and maintenance of county road rights-of-way located within the area unless the city and the county contract otherwise. So once a new city is formed, the city will take ownership of those roadways, and then it will be a discussion as to how those roadways are maintained. Currently, the feasibility study has that the city's will own the roads, but there are no expenses to either maintain or contract with the county for the maintenance of the same.
Okay, and while you're standing up there, can you talk about franchise fees? Some of the cities say they're going to use franchise fees as part of their revenue stream, how that works and how that equates to the Department of Transportation.
Absolutely. So that's related to that. In the ownership of the roads, the cities were able to collect franchise fees, which is a fee on 4 different utilities, and that's power, gas, cable, and telephone that they're able to collect based on ownership of those roads. So that allows for the revenue to be collected. And then what we are unsure of is the expenses for the roadway maintenance piece.
Thank you very much. I have one question that I'm going to ask and answer myself because legal has given me the answer, and if I stray from the attorneys, we're all in trouble. The Pro Cityhood group claims they'll be able to obtain the East Cobb Government Center from the county, insinuating for free as taxpayers have already paid for it. They made the same claim for fire engines as well as hook and ladder trucks. Is this true? And the legally vetted response is, the only fees that are set by state law are for park property at $100 per acre and for fire stations that only serve the territory wholly within the city jurisdiction, which can be purchased for $5,000 for each fire station. Any transfer of other county property located within the new city limits will be negotiated between the 2 local governments. And that handles several questions that I've received on the cards as well. Fire Chief, Deputy Fire Chief Mike Schutz, welcome. You missed the last town hall, but we're glad you're here because I have a ton of questions just for you. East Cobb proponents claim there'll be no change in service to the fire department. What can you tell them about response times in response in the new city?
Are you going to pull the map up for that?
I think I have it somewhere.
The first part of that, it's hard to say whether your service is going to change or not because we don't know what that plan is for that department if it were to come to fruition. What I can tell you, the facts are there's 2 fire stations in the boundary of the proposed city of East Cobb, and that square footage is about the same size as the city of Marietta, and city of Marietta currently has 6 fire stations. So that's the facts of that particular statement. As far as the response times going up, if you look at the map, do you have the other map? No chance. There you go. This particular map, you see the blue and the red is the boundary of the city of East Cobb as it's proposed. The blue is the current response territory, and you see a number 15 in there. That's firehouse number 15. That's their current response area in East Cobb. And the same for 21. That's their current response area. Now, the boundaries that are proposed for the city of East Cobb will also include the red areas, and you see them as EC1, EC2, EC3, and EC4. And so what that's going to do is it's going to expand the response territories of those 2 fire stations. And in that, those areas will have a more delayed response as those apparatus are traveling to those areas inside the city limits. And as far as response times go, our 911 director, Melissa Alterio, has more information on that.
Okay, Melissa, we'll bring you up in just a second because I have 2 or 3 911 questions. But Chief, while we're talking to you, next question that's come in several times, will the same firefighters still work in the new East Cobb Fire Station if that becomes a new city?
So Director Volkman mentioned to you that in essence, we would absorb those employees. We do have vacancies in the fire department at this moment, and so the firefighters that currently serve East Cobb, we would absolutely be able to absorb those into the department and not take a significant impact on that. And so it's hard for me to say whether they would work for the city of East Cobb or not, but we would absolutely absorb those into the department.
I'm going to ask you kind of a simple version of a question that I've received many times, and there are many of these cards as well, and it has to do with, will Cobb County Fire respond to calls in the city of East Cobb if it's requested? And that also kind of dovetails into a lot of questions about mutual aid agreements and how that will work between a potential new fire department and the Cobb County Fire Department.
Yes, sir. We would have to have some type of an agreement in place between the 2 agencies, and those are drafted amongst the leadership of those departments, and then it goes to the elected officials for approval. But you have mutual aid and you have automatic aid. In both of those agreements, it's mutual. There has to be equal services on both sides of that. And so it's whatever's agreed upon at the time. So I can't say that yes, we would respond into the city without the agreements being vetted and signed, and that would have to happen after the city became, it came to fruition. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Melissa Alterio's over here in the wings. So I wanted to ask you a question dovetailing off his about response times. And I have several questions about E911 setup in the city of East Cobb and what that would mean as far as they get some funding from cell phone fees, I guess, but there's questions about radio maintenance costs, interoperability, and like you said, mutual aid. So if you can address kind of all those in one.
That's a lot. Good evening. So I wanted to piggyback off of what Deputy Chief Schutz said about response times. Everything starts with 911, right? We take the first call. We're your first point of contact, or anybody who's answering the phone, whether it's going to be the City of East Cobb's own 911 center or Cobb County 911. If there's a lot of questions unanswered with the feasibility study with regards to what it states about managing your own emergency call. So our assumption is if the City of East Cobb forms their own 911 center. And so that's really what we're talking about with response times. If the City of East Cobb forms their own 911 center and they dispatch their own fire department, if they have to call Cobb County for mutual aid, then that could be a delay. Just because of the transfer of phone calls. If Cobb County 911 is answering your 911 calls and we dispatch for your fire department in the same way that we do in the city of Marietta, it's all in one house. It's all a seamless transfer of operations. It's all done fairly quickly, and response times are, what's the word I'm trying to say? That they're minimal. Okay, so there'll be a minimal increase in response times there. So there's a lot of questions that are still unanswered with that. We provide a service like no other in the state of Georgia, being a county 911 center. The only other 911 center in the state of Georgia that's remarkably close to us or remotely close to us is the city of Alpharetta with regards to the protocols that we provide. And we feel the need to state that because when you call 911, you have an expectation of service. You have an expectation that you've received the right location and that we're going to help you. There's largely a misconception about 911 centers being the same across the board, and they're not. And so a brief example of that is if you were to call 911 for a medical call inside Cobb County, the questions that we ask help us triage that call for our emergency responders to determine what type of response that we need to send you, simultaneously dispatching that call if it's deemed to be a priority, for instance, a chest pains call or a cardiac arrest. And then while that unit is being dispatched by another dispatcher in the same location from a seamless transfer in the computer system, we are providing you with pre-arrival, post-dispatch, pre-arrival, pre-hospital instructions. We call that the 0-minute response, meaning we're providing CPR instructions over the phone. We're providing you Heimlich maneuver instructions over the phone. If you find yourself trapped in a house fire, we are providing instructions on how to remain safe inside that house fire or how to safely get out of that house. If you find yourself involved in an active shooter situation, we are providing you safety instructions to either run, hide, or fight. We have that certification here in Cobb County. Not every 911 center does. The state right now has a bill that's, I think it has passed the Senate and perhaps it's in the House now, that's requiring all state of Georgia 911 centers to have telephone CPR instructions. We do not know if it's going to be passed. Cobb County goes above and beyond that, and we already do have that certification. So we call that the 0-minute response. Not every 911 center has that training, has that certification, and it's also a lot of money to maintain that continuing dispatch education for our 911 professionals. Now, going to the other side with regards to the radio system. This request for mutual aid, for example, is the City of East Cobb going to be on Cobb County 911's radio system? We manage the largest radio system in the state of Georgia. We have 6 counties on our radio system. We don't dispatch for 6 counties. They're on our radio system, which provides us with interoperability with all of those counties. It's over 11,000 users. The second to that is Fulton County's radio system. So is the City of East Cobb going to be on our radio system? And if so, that may make mutual aid requests pretty easy and straightforward if it's just a request over the radio. And if not, then there could be a slight delay, having to pick up that phone, calling our 911 center, stating what it is that we need, versus, again, having all of it received and dispatched in our own 911 center, in the same way we do the city of Marietta. Did I cover everything?
So, if not, I'll come back to you.
Okay.
I'm actually panicking a little bit. We're about a half an hour in. I still got a ton of questions, so I'm going to get through these as fast as we can. Back to you, Fire Chief, Deputy Fire Chief Schutz. So you said that the city of Marietta is about the same size and has 6 fire stations, but there's only 2 currently in East Cobb, so aren't we already underserved? And I'll pull up this map, which may help you.
It's a good question. If you look at the map, you see the red, their little shields, the little red dots up there. Those are the fire stations they're still in the Cobb County boundaries on this particular map, and you can see how close they are to the city, the way the boundary is set. And we have very good coverage. We have 29 fire stations. As a matter of fact, I'm glad you brought that up. 2 different type of structure fires. You have a commercial fire and you have a residential fire. In a single-family dwelling residential fire, Cobb County Fire and Emergency Services right now, today, will send 24 individual firefighters to that house fire. You get 3 engines, a ladder truck, a rescue truck, 2 battalion chiefs, and an air truck for a single-family dwelling. Anything that is not a single-family dwelling is considered commercial, and you get 31 responders. Now, I don't know how you break that up into 2 fire stations. I don't know what their model is going to be. There's all kinds of different fire service models out there, but that's what you're getting now for your Cobb County Fire Service. And so we will border it, obviously, and that's how you're being served today. But if the boundary continues and it votes that way, then you will inherit 2 fire stations, and however they choose to staff that. Whether it's 2 engines, 3 engines, a ladder truck, a rescue, we don't know what that model is. So right now you have an engine at 15, you have an engine, an aerial, and a rescue at 21. You have an engine, an aerial, a battalion chief at 14. You have an engine at 20, and you have an engine at Station 3 and an engine and aerial at Station 19. That's your area of coverage at the moment.
And Chief, while you're talking, we got several questions about mutual aid agreements. Can you kind of explain who you have those with now and how they work?
Yes, sir. So we have mutual aid agreements with everybody that essentially that we touch on our borders. So all the counties surrounding us, the cities, Austell and the city of Smyrna, they actually have their own departments. We have mutual aid with them. And Marietta, we have automatic aid. Automatic aid, like Melissa spoke of, they're on the same radio channel with us. They dispatch calls, and whichever unit's closer, Cobb or Marietta, will go. And we back each other up. We talk to each other on the radio. Mutual aid is slightly different. If we do have to respond to a different agency through mutual aid, we have to tap in the radio channels together because we don't talk on the same channels. And then there's operational differences there. With automatic aid, the way Marietta does it is the same way we do it. But when there's mutual aid, operations could be slightly different. And they're essentially contracts that have to be drawn up between the 2 entities and agreed upon. And I'll say it again, that as mutual aid and automatic aid, they've got to be reciprocal. We can't give all of this and get nothing in return, so to speak. And so there has to be a benefit from both sides of a mutual aid agreement in order for them to be signed and agreed upon, and then approved by the elected officials.
Okay, Interim Chief Hamilton, I know you thought you were going to get away without getting any questions, but let me throw some at you from the cards. First of all, how many police stations in the city of East Cobb?
In the city of East Cobb, we have 1. And that's precinct 4.
And explain how your mutual aid with neighboring departments is different than the fire's mutual aid.
Well, the police department, we don't respond off of mutual aid. We actually respond off of state law. And basically our state law mandates us to, if our neighboring cities or counties or municipalities are having any kind of emergency issues, we will respond. And if the city of East Cobb came to fruition, it'll pretty much kind of fall under that also.
So explain, I guess the next question kind of is what I already asked the fire chief, but will the same officers be in the police precinct if it becomes a city?
Well, I'm gonna be honest with you, just like Chief Schultz said earlier, I really can't answer that. I guess when the time comes, it's gonna really boil down to the individual officers. If they make the decision that they want to leave Cobb County Police Department and go work for the city, that's gonna really be on them. So I'm gonna say, I will hope to think they want to stay with us, right? But if that's a decision that they make for them and their families, then we'll support it.
And Chief, it's a tough question to answer because response times are different for the fire department and are measured differently than for the police department, but there are several questions that have come in on the email and the cards about how this would affect police response times. Is there any way you can quantify that?
Well, again, it boils down to several factors, actually. I mean, it's going to depend on how many officers the city actually acquires, and that's going to be a determination by their city leadership. I know you would think that it's going to make, there's going to be a lot more police officers because the city would be a lot smaller. You have a smaller area to patrol. But I think the missing factors that people don't really realize is that even now, I mean, the PD, we're going to respond on, I guess, lack of a better word, the more important dispatches, right? So priority calls. So, you could have, stolen wallet calls all day long, but we're going to respond to an armed robbery call, obviously, first. So you could have maybe more officers, but also, again, it depends on what type of call it is. Like right now, if we have an armed robbery, we're going to send probably about 4 or 5 or 6 police officers might actually go to that area, right? If you're in the city of East Cobb, you're probably going to have less officers that'll be able to respond to these major calls. And if they're tied up, and then you have other calls on the other side of the city, the response times are obviously going to get larger. So there are multiple factors that people got to take into consideration. And just because you might have a set number, it's going to depend on the type of calls that these officers have to respond to in a given day.
Here's a question you may not have an answer for, but I've got 2 very similar ones. If the new city of East Cobb's police department does not have a homicide division, a K-9 division, there's another question in here about SWAT call-outs, would the Cobb County Police Department provide those services? And if you did, would there be a fee associated with them?
The fee portion, that is totally above my pay grade, so I'm not going to touch that at all. I have no idea. As far as if they're going to be able to utilize our detectives, our SWAT team, our K-9 team, and that's one big thing about the greatness of our county and our county PD is that we have multiple resources. I will tell you this. It will depend on whatever type of negotiations that goes on between our county and them, but we would never turn down anyone for help. The bottom line, at the end of the day, it's about the safety of the Cobb County citizens. So if they're in need, and if someone's hurt, especially, and I think there was also a question about whether or not we're going to ever back up the city officers. I can tell you right now, the PD, we're a different breed. We don't really care about where you're at. It's when you call for help, we're going to come. So if our fellow officers need help, we're going to be there for them.
And you explained this in the last town hall, but a couple of questions about how the beats within the precincts are divided. And so how many precincts beats are in the proposed city? And then how would that change if that becomes a city for the rest of Precinct 4?
Well, currently, Precinct 4 now has 10 beats. If I was reading the feasibility study and looking at the way the map is set up, that would condense to 3.5 beats would go into incorporated city of East Cobb. So what that means is obviously it's a smaller area of patrol, but again, it kind of goes back to what I said earlier. You're going to have less officers, really, because we currently now at Precinct 4, we have 46 patrol officers that are on the beat now. That is not where we should be, but that's what our current roster is as far as patrol officers. So it's going to be considerably lower than that for the city of East Cobb. because of the 3.5 beats, and we will still have 6.5 beats for the unincorporated Cobb, which entail we would still need a lot more police officers to be able to cover that ground. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but that was,
I'm going to say it did,
Okay.
just because I need to move on.
all right, awesome.
I got to go back to the the deputy fire chief, because I've got a bunch of questions that have been submitted on the cards that are similar in nature. What is your best guess on the ISO rating residents of East Cobb would have under a new fire department? And kind of dovetailing along those lines, can you explain what an ISO rating is, how you get it, and what it means?
That's a very loaded question, and I really, really like my job. The ISO rating it has to do with insurance, homeowners insurance, the insurance that businesses, the industry, that's what a lot of insurance companies base the rates on, is the ISO rating. Cobb County Fire and Emergency Services is currently at an ISO 1, which is the best rating that you can have. It's the lowest possible insurance rates that you could have if your insurance company uses ISO as their gauge. It's really beneficial to the industry and businesses, because they look at that insurance rate a little bit different than they do homeowners. And so I am not going to try to speculate as to what East Cobb would be, but I can tell you, based on the map that you saw, 2 stations in that kind of square miles, depending on the equipment that they choose to put in those fire stations, will affect the ISO rating. ISO ratings can be improved with automatic aid agreements if that is something that is agreed upon by the entities. Mutual aid does not benefit ISO at all. It's an independent company that come in and they basically look at your entire department, fire response only. We do EMS, we do all these other things, but they don't look at any of that. They look at your water system, they look at 911, and they look at the fire department. And they scrutinize it, they look at your training records and all this stuff, and they come in about once every 5 or 6 years to review, to see if you're doing what you said you did. And then they give you, a stamp of approval. And we've moved up from a 3 to a 1. And so you're getting the best service you could possibly get right now, and I would not speculate as to what East Cobb's ISO rating would be. I would imagine it would be lower than an ISO 1. All the way, a 10 is no fire service at all. So that gives you your scale if you want to look at it that way.
I'm going to put you on the spot, because I don't know if you know the answer, because I got chastised by the fire chief after the last one. What percentage of fire departments in the country have an ISO 1?
I think he told me you were going to ask me this. There's 21,000 and some change fire departments across the country. There's a gamut from full-time to volunteers to combination departments that have both. I can tell you Cobb County, because it's a large county entity, a large county service, it's less than 1% of all departments in the country that have an ISO 1 as large as a county service. Cities get it, smaller counties get it, smaller services get it, but it's less than 1% of county municipalities that have an ISO 1 rating. And we're also accredited. As a matter of fact, that's why the fire chief's not here. He's receiving our accreditation. We received it again yesterday morning, and so we are also accredited.
And again, I don't know, this is a financial thing, so I don't know if you have the answer to this, but can you explain the difference in revenue received from the fire district fund in East Cobb versus how much it costs to provide fire service for that same area?
Sure. You can pull up, if you can go back to the, well, you don't need to. It's about 14.
Pull the mic closer.
Sorry. There you go. Better? Okay. So we're looking at about $14 million of lost revenue to the fire fund. Worked with Chief Johnson to say that what the total cost was, including personnel, operating capital for the servicing that same area. It was about it was pretty close to the amount. I think it was just under 13 million, but what that didn't take into account for is the capital replacement of the apparatus. So that's where we have the big difference right there.
Okay. And Chief, the costs for East Cobb, providing service to East Cobb, don't necessarily equate with that number. Does that sound correct?
I believe what I saw, and I don't remember if it was a feasibility study or not, but I think they projected their fire department budget to be around $5 million.
That's correct.
So I would say they don't match.
I've got a lot of questions in here about who set the boundaries for the city of East Cobb and those kind of things. We can't answer those because we were not involved in that. I will say this, I got a couple of questions about people asking if they're in the boundaries, and you can go to our website, cobbcounty.org/cityhood, and on there is a link to a GIS map where you can actually put your address in. It'll zoom into your address, and you can see if you're in one of the city boundaries or not, so you can do that. And there's a lot of other questions that we can't answer in this forum either about where the city hall will be, where the police headquarters will be, as well. Those, again, are simply questions that we cannot answer. I'm going to page the county manager to the front because I'm going to ask her a question, and then later I will get in trouble for doing so. But we're just going to let it roll because somebody's asking the question, and we're going to see if we can get an answer. So the question is, we've stated that no one will lose their job if the four cities become cities, but there was a hearing, work session we held recently where we would hire 600 plus more workers. Why? That doesn't seem to make sense.
Okay, so January 2021, the chair and the board, for the first time in a long time, asked the staff what our needs are. What are your critical needs? And so we were asked to provide that in budget presentations. So our CFO said, well, okay, if we want to ask everybody and level the playing field, we need to ask our elected and constitutional officers as well as about the 30-plus departments that I oversee. And so we started that process. So there is nothing out there that basically says that the county is going to hire all 516 positions that were requested in the general fund, and I can't even remember in the
658?
658 total, countywide. The board has not committed to that. They only ask, what are your critical needs? So prior to Cityhood discussions, we were already looking at the deficit of positions. The county is not any different than any other private or corporate entity that is experiencing attrition, experiencing challenges with recruitment, challenges with retaining the employees that we have. So we're talking about whether or not our employees may go to the proposed 4 additional cities. We're losing them every day to existing cities. We're losing them to our sister counties. We have some departments that are down 20, 30%, and they advertise positions 3, 4, 5 times. My CFO has, 4 or 5 positions open, critical positions open, and how many times have you advertised for them?
I've had one open for over 2 years.
2 years. It is very difficult to get and to also be competitive. So we're not saying by any means that we're going to hire, 500, 600 employees. At this rate, we're lucky to keep what we have. And so what we're doing is just trying to make sure that we can continue to staff our departments at the level of service that you have come to expect, quite frankly. And so that's all we're trying to do. So we will continue to scrub the list. We will continue to meet with our Board of Commissioners and determine what that need really is. But for the most part, I will say this. When we spoke with some of the authors of the bills for proposed cities, one of the things I asked was, is there a service delivery that you are unhappy with? Come sit down and talk with me about what it is we're not providing for you. Because usually, the impetus for new cities come from poor service, poor response times, either from 911, fire, PD. And the response was, we don't have an issue with the services that you're providing. So just so you are aware, our fire department is number one, just got accredited. Your 911 operator was just received the 911 Operator of the Year, Director of the Year. Your elections director, thank you, good job, Melissa. Your elections director, Janine Everler, was named the Elections Director of the Year for the state of Georgia. So you have much in which to be proud. And though we're not saying that we can't be even better with 4 more cities coming into Cobb, what we want to say to you is today, help us to hire, to bring in, and to retain the best talent we can possibly have to continue to provide you the level of service that you continue to enjoy. That's all we're saying, so that we can remain competitive. I'll take any other questions that you may have about that if necessary.
All right, I do. I've dug a hole, so I'm just going to dig it deeper. I'm just going to keep on going. We've got a lot of questions that seem to insinuate that the county's been slow to notify residents of what's going on about these developments and give information about them. And how would you respond to those concerns that you know, we just haven't been notifying people of this?
About the Cityhood?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, as soon as we knew they were going through the legislature, the first thing we did was to set up a website to answer your questions, the frequently asked questions that were coming into our Board of Commissioners. So we really did try to hire an agency to come in to do the feasibility study. We were told that they're going through the legislature so fast, there's no way we could get you the response that quickly. And then I relied a little bit on my own analytical skills, having a doctorate degree, and I said, I think we got some pretty smart folk here who work at Cobb County. I know how to look at data. Well, Board of Commissioners knows how to look at data. And when I reached out to the professor that we were trying to hire to do the impact of the feasibility studies, he says, Dr. McMorris, what are you looking at? And when I told him what we were looking at, he specifically said, that's exactly what I would have done. He would have been calling your CFO, your fire chief, your police chief, your public safety director, me, and many others who work at the county to get the data, so that they could analyze what was exactly in the feasibility study. So that's what we did. It's exactly what we did. We looked at the feasibility study, every service that they said they would offer, and I sat down with my team, and I said, go line by line in that study. And then I want you to look at the data based on the service we provide, and then respond to that. Make no assumptions, but if there are questions that are not answered, we need to say, we don't know what the answers to those questions are. So I went back to that professor, and I said, are we doing it right? And he said, yes, you are. So the only thing we're trying to do here tonight is just to answer your questions. There's a lot that we don't know, but in that not knowing, it doesn't mean that we're for or against it. We're honestly saying we don't know the answers to those questions. But when you go into the voting booth to vote, you vote what is best for you and your family, and we've said that before. That's all we're asking you to do. And if it's 3, 4, 2, or 1, I think my team has said, we are here. We are one Cobb County. We will continue to answer your call. We will continue to provide you the best level of service that we can offer, because that's what we do. Anything else?
Fire questions.
Fire has questions? Okay, good deal. Thank you.
Thank you, County Manager Dr. Jackie McMorris, who was really reluctant to come up here and speak today. So I just want to say it's been great on my behalf for working for the county, because this may be it for me. So maybe my last rodeo. A couple of follow-ups that have come in from the cards, and I think we got last call on those for the Deputy Fire Chief, because you're oh so popular tonight. What is the ISO rating for Marietta, if you know, with their 6 fire stations?
I don't know. I believe they're a 1, but I'm not entirely positive on that.
All right, we'll have to get the chief on the phone. Other surrounding counties have told us it costs only $2.5 million to operate a fire station on average. Is that true, or do you know?
I guess that depends on how they staff it. Is it full-time, part-time, volunteer? And the equipment that they have in it. Is it an engine, a truck, both, aerial, rescue? There's a lot of variables to that. So that's a difficult one to answer.
Okay. And the computer's telling me it must be time to go. I'm going to make sure we've covered everything as well. And Bill, I think we've already covered this about what the $41 million means. Is that just for 1 year? Is that for years down the road? Is that going to be every year? They're asking for kind of long-term implications.
So the 41 million is, I would say, it's not going to necessarily all hit the first year based on when they incorporate, but that would be a full year impact. So let's say a full year impact of year 2.
Okay. All right, I appreciate it. I'm looking through these questions too, and again, there's some that we can't answer because the county's not involved in forming these cities or coming up with the feasibility studies or putting them through the legislature. So a lot of the questions I got that I haven't touched there are just simply stuff that we cannot answer with the county. But I appreciate it. Again, if the computer was still working, you could go to cobbcounty.org/cityhood. We've got our FAQs there. We keep adding information as it comes in. Our GIS folks have done a great job of adding maps in there and kind of some interactive stuff so you can put your address in there, see exactly where you're at. And as you continue to file questions in, we'll continue to put them on that website. In the meantime, thank you for coming. Thanks for watching, and y'all have a good night and drive safely.